Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/itslayspodcast and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download the title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/itslayspodcast. Let's get into it.
We're going to expand our weekly video segment to take you into the back shelves of your local video store. Back where it says horror videos and where kids are devouring some awful films that we call the video nasties.
Are you freebasing? Inquiring minds want to know.
I have to break free from this culture of mechanical reproductions and the thick incrustations dying on the surface.
Fuck the prime time, bitch!
On with the new Fletch.
The pain, I can assure you, will be exquisite. As for our deaths, come with me and be immortal.
We have such sights to show you.
We've got to return some videotapes.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to the It Slays podcast. I'm your humble host, Rowan.
And this is that weird white dog shit from the 70s, Mike.
And we are Xylia-less tonight. I think that could be a word. She's under the weather.
Weep for us. Weep for her.
Yes, we are all very sad. We don't have any of the real smarts on the podcast. You're just getting the pure silliness.
It's the two dum-dums.
Which is probably good for this film, so...
Oh yeah, we don't want any, like, intellectual interjection here tonight. This is not...
Get that intellect out of here.
We need to abandon all brain cells.
I figure we'll do it nice and easy for the question today. What have you been checking out movie-wise, television-wise? What's going on in that media life? Even music, anything.
Well, that media life is always going. I've been watching the newest season on Netflix. I know it's not like, it might be like slightly behind from when it actually aired on Australian TV, but I'm a huge sucker for the Australian women's prison drama Wentworth, and I finally am getting around. They've fairly recently, like within the last couple months, put up the new season, and I've been putting off watching it because I tend to become obsessed with it, so I'm actually watching that now and like kind of sinking my time into it.
I've never seen that.
Oh my god, it's spectacular. A lot of people, obviously, because it's a women's prison show, compare it to Orange is the New Black, and I think it started around the same time, but although I like Orange is the New Black because it's got a lot of lighter, more comedic moments and a lot of like more recognizable, obviously, like North American TV and movie stars, Wentworth is just, I love it. It's so much soapier and more dramatic and shocking, and I love the actors in it. I love the music. I love everything about it. The writing is great. It's just one of those shows that, like, honestly, all my lesbians were after me for years to get into. And I finally was like, okay, I finished Orange is the New Black. I'm going to watch it. And I was like, fuck, where has this been all my life?
I've heard good things about it.
Oh my god. It's very much like kind of a, like, I want to say, I mean, maybe not in Australia, but like, everybody that has been, recommending it to me for years is, all of my dearest lesbians. So it's kind of like this, like, cult lesbian show in North America. But, like, don't let that, put you off if that's not your thing. It's not like that's what it's all about. But, I mean, a women's prison show, obviously, that kind of, like, has that element to it.
Or let it put you on, either way.
I mean, listen, it's not, not titillating or, like, for the male gaze at all. Like, there's no, like, faux titillation, and, like, it's all, trust me, this shit is, like, not meant for straight cis male gaze.
Bros may not enter.
Exactly. And when I say the male gaze, just because when I've been having discussions with people, like intellectual discussions, it has taken them quite a while into our conversation before they realized I meant gaze as in the look, as in Gaze, not gaze as in Gays. I remember specifically having a conversation with a dear old friend of mine once about the gays, and I had just been reading Laura Mulvey, obviously, which is kind of like where that notion kind of became popular in terms of like film criticism and television criticism. And I remember, like, just in the middle of the conversation, we had been talking for like 15 or 20 minutes, her eyes just snapping, and she goes, oh, gaze, Gaze. I was like, so you literally thought I was talking about something completely different that has nothing to do with anything this whole conversation, and she was just like smiling and nodding like, what is this fucking lunatic talking about? But anyway, so to get back on track, it's mostly been Wentworth that I've been consuming. Wentworth, the new Gaga single, which I love and did not hear a month ago when it leaked. There were some really good albums out this week. Princess Nokia, Caribou had a new album out, Real Estate. So I've been listening to that a lot. Of course, my husband Orville Peck, I just keep listening to his album over and over. If you haven't listened, do it. The album Pony, best album of the last, like, probably 5 years. Anyway, that's all I'm saying.
That's a big word.
It is, and like technically you'd call it country, which I don't mind, but it's kind of like that old school, moody, like Elvis, Patsy Cline, Merle Haggard, Johnny Cash, like really dark, moody, like gothic rock. It's really twangy. You know what I mean?
See, I don't mind that kind of like country-esque stuff. I like older.
Yeah, see, and that's what it is. It's very much like old country, like classic country, not like country pop.
Dolly,
which of course has its
Johnny.
place. I mean, like, love the Dixie Chicks, etc. But most of it, the current stuff I don't really care for. But Orville, love him. We'll never not listen to him.
Wow, that's I might have
to
check that out.
What are your media consumptions in this February of 2020, or should I say March?
Whenever this comes out.
Whenever this comes out. And actually, technically, right now it is March, so...
Yeah, anyway. That's right. We're very behind. Music-wise, I haven't really been listening to anything new, which is... My phone is always full. Like, I download new albums every week, but then usually if I'm on my way to work or back, I'm also, like... months and months backdated on podcasts, so I'm like trying to get through my podcasts, and of course that's like always a losing situation because podcasts are always like an hour and a half long, 2 hours.
Oh yeah, and then there's always 12 or 15 that you're listening to, so that's like automatically like 20 hours of listening every week, right? Like it's...
Yeah, exactly. And podcast wise, probably, things a little different than probably people listening are into. I listen to a lot of like NBA podcasts because that's kind of my only sports consumption.
Bro, you're such a bro.
I know, I'm such a bro. But I do listen to, I've been listening to Alone in the Dark, which is another horror podcast. Straight Chillin'. What else I think that's really all I've been listening to right now. I've also kind of been in this, like, me and Xylia have been going through the rabbit hole of Watch Mojo, like top songs of like the 90s and 2000s and stuff.
Oh, nice. I love it.
So I've been revisiting that. For some reason, I feel like I'm going to revisit Nelly's discography for some reason.
I mean, really, there's only 2 songs that you need to revisit. Obviously, Hot in Here, because it's a masterpiece. And I don't say that lightly, and I will not say that about any other song in his discography. But that is a fucking fire song. And I don't care what anybody says. That song is lit. It's everything. That and his song with Kelly Rowland from Destiny's Child.
Oh, such a radio classic.
Yep.
Trying to think. That's probably it for kind of audio stuff. Movie-wise, by the time this comes out, if you're on Patreon, you'll be able to listen to my review on Fantasy Island. I had gone and seen that in the theater. Me and Xylia watched Hype on Tubi because... if you don't know, Tubi actually is now accessing the Shout channel, as well as the Full Moon Entertainment channel. So on the Shout side, we watched this documentary called Hype. It was really interesting. It was about basically Seattle, like grunge, the beginning of grunge, and throughout that period. But we were saying it was like really interesting because Nirvana's like barely in it. They only really touch on Nirvana like once. And it's all these other bands that you like wouldn't necessarily have heard of that were kind of very influential to that sound.
Yes, I mean, everybody knows Nirvana. Like,
yeah, exactly.
We don't need any more. I mean, love them. Obviously, they were, a formative stepping stone in my childhood, and we'll love them until the day I die. But like, we all know Nirvana and grunge. Like, this is, like, let's move on. Let's dig deeper. I love that somebody did that.
Yeah, it was really, really well done. Other than that, what have I been watching? Not much. I somewhat jumped on the Love is Blind thing with Xylia. So I saw a couple episodes of that. I don't watch them all. Xylia hasn't watched it all.
I am not gonna lie. I really want to watch Love is Blind, and that, like, anything that's awful and is full of awful people, I tend to enjoy. So, on, like, obviously a very base level, I really want to watch that. I want to watch that fucking Circle garbage, too. Like, I just keep putting it off because I was like, I can't. But I want to.
Xylia tried to watch The Circle. She said it wasn't very good, but she really likes the Love is Blind one. So, yeah, like I said, I haven't watched, like, the last couple episodes. She's just kind of watched it because I haven't been interested at the time to watch it. I think the only other real thing I watched the Batman Hush animation film, which was pretty good because I had never read Hush, so I didn't really know anything about it. It was alright. You know what you're gonna get with, like, a DC animation.
Of course.
The only other real thing I can think of that was pretty sweet is I posted it on our Instagram that I had gone to Value Village and I found a copy of the book/textbook, The Dread of Difference.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Literally, my Bible. Literally, if my apartment was on fire and I could only choose, like, 4 or 5 books to bring with me, that is the first one I'm going for. I can't even deal with this right now. Like, it's literally, like, everything about my life is encapsulated in that book. I'm so fucking proud of you. Now, is it the edition that has Carrie on the front or another edition?
I found out. I was gonna say, because when I posted on Instagram, someone had wrote and said, I've got a copy that has Norma Bates on it.
Yeah, I think that's the newer edition.
Okay, mine is the Carrie edition.
Yeah, that one's, I think there's only 3 or 4 editions, and I think the Carrie one is the second newest. I think there's only, like, one essay that's different in it, maybe. Like, they added a new one or something.
It was definitely, I haven't read it yet, but it was only $5.99 at Value Village.
Oh, I paid, like, $50 for that new. From Amazon. And, by the way, anybody who's listening who has any interest in, like, horror films and gender, anything, like, sexuality, anything like that, The Dread of Difference is and you know what, even if you don't have any interest in, like, gender in the horror film and you just like horror films, there is so many absolutely mind-blowing, skull-exploding pieces in this book on horror films, and it covers the span of everything. Like, you got slasher movies, like, supernatural stuff, like, everything is in there, and it will literally take your brain and turn it into a fucking pretzel and wring it out and stomp on it. It is. That's so what I like to hear. Good.
I'm very excited to start it. I will say that was, like, a very productive trip to Value Village, because I find, and if you're listening and you're not from Canada, Value Village is like a thrift shop.
Yeah.
It was very productive. I picked that up. I also got a copy of Hunting Humans.
Oh, excellent.
Because I had never read that. I got a copy of the Gremlins, the original movie, like the novelization book. And I only really picked it up because I was like, oh, I've never seen it before. And then I was just like, I was looking for something else, but I casually was online and noticed that it like copies of it on eBay sell for like $80.
And you bought it for like 99 cents.
Yeah, and it's just like a trade paperback, so I was like, oh, I'll buy that for like $1 and read it. That's sweet. And then I also got a hardcover copy of Dear White People, like the novelization of the show, and just full of facts. And yeah, that's pretty much all I've really been up to. Oh, I should mention the last thing I did watch that was amazing. I watched Xylia was asleep on the couch and I was like half asleep, so I turned on a live concert video of the Doors in California, and it was definitely well worth the watch.
Love it. I just brought up the Doors yesterday.
One of my all-time favorites. Mm-hmm. You can't go wrong.
They're ageless. Like, it's hippies of every generation will fall at their altar. Like, it's, yeah.
So what do you think? That time, let's get into it.
Let's get into it, yeah.
Let's get into it.
Let's just throw this shit against the wall and see what happens.
See where it lands. So, we are doing Mike's pick, And as always, he always picks the most interesting of films.
I do. I'm a man of taste. Or distaste, depending on...
or distaste, however you want to look at it. The film for this episode is Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker from 1981, or it could be Night Warning, depending on when you saw it or where you saw it. It was released with 2 different names. Why don't you talk about why you picked this, Mike?
Okay, well, for years, and I mean years, like, since I was a teenager, I had seen, because you know me, I was trawling all the film books and the websites and blogs and everything, you know, for anything to do with cult horror, and, I mean, obviously that's, like, my aesthetic. And this one just kept constantly popping up, and it was years and years and years and years and years that, like, you know, whenever I was looking for, like, really cool, obscure, bonkers, like, cult horror, and especially 80s horror, because, you know, we all kind of, like, love that. That's, like, our aesthetic, of course.
Of course.
You know, this would always come up, but, like, I could never find it anywhere. And it was a couple years ago released, I think, by Scorpion, maybe, or somebody. Anyway, one of the boutique labels, God love them, re-released it on Blu-ray, but, I mean, like, for years it was not available in any form. And the first time I saw it, which was years and years and years ago, and was also the last time I saw it, I had to torrent it. And it was a shitty, like, rip from, like, a VHS from, like, 1984, and it was awful quality. And I don't remember which title it went by, because it could have been the Night Warning, but I just remember going, this is bananas, and I can understand why everybody keeps writing about, like, this is worth seeing even if you hate it, because it's just one of these, like, cult horror movies that it's like a lot of things that came out at the time, but is also very, very different from them. That there's lots you can dig into there, and that was the thing. And, like, kind of when I found out about it, I was, like, really getting into, you know, like, dissecting movies and stuff, so, and, like, kind of looking at the issues. So the fact that this kept coming up and they were saying, like, there's a lot going on in it for, like, a cheesy B horror movie, that really tickled all my spots, if you know what I'm saying. So that was kind of like my history with it. It was one of those, like, treasures that I sought out for years and finally saw, and then made my roommate at the time watch while we were stoned, and I'm sure she loved that. Anyway, and so then I recommended it to you guys, because I was like, who better to watch this and talk about it with than Xylia and Rowan?
Yeah, and I had zero, like, I'd never heard of it. I try amazing poster, I will say that, because you may or may not have sent me the torrent for it, and it had, like, the poster artwork in it.
It's kind of stunning.
Yeah, I really, really like it. And, no experience with it. Just kind of went into it not knowing what was gonna proceed in front of my eyes. I knew what to expect from a pick that you pick, so...
Fair.
I was gonna say,
I'm jealous of your going into it completely blind, because by the time I saw it, I had, you know, heard so many people online talking about it that I did have a really good idea of what was going to happen and what it was about. So I already had, you know, kind of like a preconceived notion, whereas you didn't. Other than the fact that it was a Mike pick, which does give you a fairly good idea. And I mean, I want to know, okay, right now, before we go further, as a Mike pick, how do you rate it? Like, on my criteria of
that's a good one.
My aesthetic and my picks, like, is it
a
quintessential Mike pick? Is it off the wall?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of your most interesting picks.
Okay.
I would definitely say, and not just because of subject matter, but it's definitely up there with, like, Cruising.
Yeah.
Where like, I kind of the same thing, where, like, I only compare them because it was like, I was not familiar with Cruising whatsoever, and then I was just like, this is, like...
And then I...
Interesting.
Opened up your eyes.
That's right. So let's get into the trailer, and we'll come back with the bio and all that good stuff.
So shocking, so terrifying, so powerful. Night Warning has been named Best Horror Film of the Year by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror. Billy and Julie, young, innocent, in love. It was all a mistake. They didn't go looking for trouble. They were just too curious. Without knowing, they've uncovered a deadly secret. By accident, they've stumbled onto a grisly murder. Now, they know too much to live. A chilling tale of a young boy and girl, innocent victims, now targets of a frenzied obsession with murder. See the award-winning Night Warning.
All right, so the bio for Butcher Baker, Nightmare Maker. I will say this before I read the bio. I think every time me and Xylia have said the name of this film, we've said something different because we're just doing it off the top of the head, and I always say like Butcher Baker Candlestick Maker, or like
which of course it's a riff on, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like I should have just, you know, known it as Night Warning. It probably would have been a lot easier.
I mean, the 3 syllables as opposed to like 15.
So the bio goes as such. An orphan teenager finds himself being dominated by his aunt, who's hell-bent on keeping him with her at all costs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's pretty much the movie in a nutshell.
Yeah, I was going to say a little bit of a understatement, maybe. Yeah. I figure, as always, before we get into the full review, let's talk about the makers and some of the people in this film, because for a film I've never heard of, this definitely has like some people attached to it.
Yeah.
Even if I didn't know till I looked it up. So it's directed by William Asher, who, if someone said that name to me, I would have no idea. I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
So then I went and looked at his like
extensive.
Yeah. I don't want to say filmography, more his television directorial stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, maybe some shows that you may or may not have heard of, such as The Twilight Zone, Bewitched, I Love Lucy, Dukes of Hazzard, like kind of seminal television shows from
Gidget, Operation Petticoat, Alice, Bad News Bears, like everything.
And I think I saw too that he was married to the woman from Bewitched, right? I think I read that.
Oh, I didn't know that. God, what's her name? Elizabeth Montgomery? Yeah, he was married to her. Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, like, that's pretty interesting, simply on the fact of what kind of movie it is and what it is. And it's like this guy that comes from this, like, wholesome television show.
Oh, yeah, and he did, like, Beach Blanket Bingo, so all the, like, you know, Annette, Disney, what was it, Mickey Mouse Club type movies in like the 60s.
Yeah, it's just
very
amazing.
Wholesome, very, for the time of like the 60s and 70s when there was that like very massive like shift into like countercultural, you know, hippies and drugs and experimentation. But he was involved in all this stuff that was very much like, we're going to ignore that the countercultural shift is happening. Right? Like, that's just what's so funny about, like, his filmography in, like, the 60s and 70s.
I was going to say, too, as I was looking at, like, the actresses and the actors, I thought it was really interesting because there's a lot of people that I was like, I've seen their face, I think, but I'm not sure. And then, like, a lot of people that I just, like, apparently were, like, pretty big heavyweights, but not, like, I didn't know them necessarily.
Yeah.
So I figured we'd show just the main one. So, Susan Tyrrell, who played Cheryl Roberts.
I love her so fucking much. Like
I could
love
not
her.
place
Girl,
where I knew her
really?
from.
You could not figure out where you knew her from. I guess that's fair. She wasn't wearing the wigs, but anyway, go ahead.
So, well, no, the real question is, can you guess where I know her from?
I'm gonna assume you know her from the same thing I know her from, which is John Waters' fucking classic Crybaby.
No.
What?
I've never seen that.
Oh
I've
my
never seen
god.
it.
Divorce. Okay, where do you know her from?
I know her from Big Top Pee-wee.
Of course she was in Big Top Pee-wee.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
which I freaking love.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, she looks so familiar. The only two that I recognize the names from was Big Top Pee-wee, and she was also in Poison Ivy, the new seduction.
Of course, with Jamie Presley, Queen.
I have yet to see any of the Poison Ivy films.
Oh my god. Okay, I loved Poison Ivy, the new seduction. I love all the Poison Ivy movies. They're one of my guilty pleasures. Like, again, I love Jamie Presley. Jamie Presley is in Poison Ivy, the new seduction.
I do like Jamie Presley.
But the first one's actually pretty good. The second one and the third one, and I think there was another one after that, are kind of trash. But they're like fun trash. It's fun.
I was gonna say, I think there's 4 because I know.
Yeah,
I know the Scream Factory box set. There's 4 films.
Yeah, because I mean the first one was kind of legit. It had like Drew Barrymore and Sarah Gilbert and Tom Skerritt and I think Diane Ladd and
like I don't really know anything about them, but like when I look at the box set in the store or whatever, I always like have it in my hand because I'm like, this looks like the kind of trash I
would pick it up if I were you because it's fun trash. It's fun 90s erotic trash. I'm just saying.
Then I might have to pick it up.
To me, that's like my entire aesthetic. So there we go.
So then we have playing Detective Joe Carlson, Bo Stevens. I wasn't as familiar with him. I mean, obviously, as we talk about this film, this character kills me, cracks me up.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was really interesting because I was like looking at it and I'm like, he's in a lot of like really bad action movies.
Yeah.
I noted like Speed 2.
What was the subtitle of that? Speed 2, like Cruise Control or something?
Cruise Control, yeah.
Oh my god, but it was a boat! It was a boat!
But then I saw, like, he was also in Kill Bill Volume 2.
Yeah. He was, I think, like, the priest or whatever? Or...
Yeah. He's also in the original and Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards. So I thought, those were what I noted.
I was gonna say, I mean, like, Tarantino knew his, like, cult status.
Yeah, so I respects to him. You know, to me, the main event is Jamie Mcnichol, which played Billy Roberts.
Yes, of course.
I looked up his filmography, really not that impressive. Apparently he was a reoccurring role on General Hospital, which 100% suits him.
Yeah. But to be fair, in the 80s, being on, like, General Hospital or something was probably, like, the equivalent today of being a Kardashian. You know? Like, I feel like that was the same cultural cash you had. If you were on a fucking soap in, like, the 70s and 80s, like, I feel like that was better than being a fucking A-list movie star.
100%. And obviously, when you kind of start watching this film, one of the first people you notice is the... You know, R.I.P. Bill Paxton.
Oh, God.
Young Bill Paxton.
It was honestly about halfway through the movie before I remember. I was like, oh my God, it's my boy Bill. And then all of a sudden, just in the middle of the movie, when I saw him, I was like, fuck, I just totally forgot that he was dead, and I just got really sad.
And I don't really like to bring up stuff he's in, because all you need to remember is Aliens 2. That's it.
Obviously.
I mean, lots of other Near Dark.
Weird Science.
Weird, like, so many
everything.
Good, like, horror, sci-fi, drama, everything. It's Bill Paxton. And then, playing Julia Duff. I always think it's interesting when they have the same name as the
well, excuse
character.
Me, the character's name was Julie and her name is Julia.
Whatever.
There's a difference.
I noticed she was in like more, I guess, things I didn't recognize till like newer stuff. I saw I don't know if you brag about it, but she was in Dumb and Dumberer. her.
She was in a lot of like TV shows in like the 80s and 90s, like Newhart.
Newhart
was like
Newhart.
that was one of those shows that was on like repeat on television.
Your grandparents
stations.
definitely like that show.
Exactly. Like my parents used to watch it all the time.
I saw she was a reoccurring role on Reba. I didn't know, but she's also a reoccurring role on Shameless. I haven't watched Shameless, so very interesting. But this is who I really want to talk about, and this is the last person, and we'll get into the meat and potatoes. Steve Easton. I lived for Steve Easton in this film. He plays Coach Tom Landers.
Steve Easton was probably my favorite person in this movie.
Hands down, I can say it right now. He was my favorite person. And his filmography basically just like blows everyone else out of the water.
And can we start off by saying one thing? That he was in the 2 gayest non-gay horror movies of all time, which is this and Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Yes. And I'm sure I planned on later getting into it, but yeah, the Nightmare on Elm Street 2 thing is so awesome because there were so many parallels I was pulling from this.
Oh my god.
And
the 2
Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Repressed gay movies of all time. Like
amazing. But, like, I'm looking at it. He was in Field of Dreams. He was in Con Air. He was in Austin Powers 2, The Black Dahlia, Dexter. For TV, he was in Gilmore Girls, Seinfeld, Little House on the Prairie. Things I didn't write down. It was like NYPD Blue. It was like NYPD Blue, the A-Team. It was like literally
like Chicago Hope. Like, literally the cream of the crop of like 90s TV.
Yeah, like this guy wins
Gilmore
life.
Girls, like everything.
Yeah, he wins life.
Yeah.
Let's just get into it. Let's start. Favorite scenes. Mike, hit us.
Oh my god, that's actually a tough one. It's probably gonna be Susan Tyrell going on a machete massacre, which was sort of a couple of scenes, but it was more like a 10-minute segment of the movie.
So good.
Just because like she was unhinged this entire movie, but at that point she cut off her hair, pulled out her machete, and was like, I'm just slicing everybody open. And you know what? Like when I watched that whole like kind of last part of the movie, I saw like parallels to a lot of other movies from like a few years later. Like I saw some like Slumber Party Massacre shit and like other movies, and I'm like, I can kind of see how this was one of those movies that filmmakers in the 80s wouldn't have wanted to admit that they saw and took anything from, but they did, whether they admit it or not, and whether they knew it or not, maybe subconsciously. But I found there was a lot of stuff in there that kind of like leaked its way into other obscure culty type movies.
I got a lot of vibes, especially the whole machete thing. I was definitely feeling Friday the 13th.
Yep, absolutely. And think about it, this was like the same time as Friday the 13th.
Yeah, so I was like, I definitely had those vibes, and she was incredible. Like she was really good in this, and this is how I know she was good, because as the movie was getting to an end, I was getting like very agitated. And let me describe this agitation. I haven't felt this agitation since I watched Gone Girl.
Oh, wow. That's a good comparison, actually.
I hate the villain so much that I'm just like, is she gonna die? And they kept like not killing her, and she kept killing everyone. And I was getting so angry because I'm like, just kill her. Stop killing people, kill her. I'm so angry at her for killing everyone. But then like, at the end, I'm like,
damn,
this wasn't
she's dead.
Well, and I'm just like, this movie made me feel that angry about it that like they did a good job. They did a good job of like making me feel anything for whether it's good
true,
or bad.
But think about it, like this wasn't like a lot of other like. I think it kind of falls generally when people want to like categorize it or like put it into like a typology of a like slasher movie, because it has a lot of the elements, but it really differs in a lot of ways. And one of them is that like not only right from the first scene is it very clear that this woman is off her goddamn meds, like to the point where she's not even in this world. That's only like a feeling you get. Like you you can't really, like, it's a vibe, right?
Yeah.
But very early on in the movie, like, they don't hide it. Like, it's literally, 15 minutes into the movie, and she commits cold-blooded, goddamn, white-hot murder. And then covers it up. So, it's not like you don't know that she's killing people. Like, you know that she is the villain, like, right from the beginning. And I find that so interesting. There's no whodunit about it. There's, like, the two cops, and I found it interesting that they had two cops, one being, you know, obviously Carlson, who was very clearly obsessed with people with dicks getting dick. And then they had that other guy whose name I can't even remember, who was trying to figure it out. But I mean, that also is, you know, very unique in that, you know, you had this, like, kind of like a dramatic tension where you knew exactly what was happening, and then you were watching this asshole and this other guy butt heads trying to figure it out, right? Like, I just thought that was such a, like, cool twist on the regular kind of like slasher tropes and, like, rote formula.
Yeah, and that was what I thought was so amazing about it, was, like you said, you're watching it, and we know in the first 5-10 minutes, like, who the villain, who the killer is, who's gonna kill all these people, and you're, like, watching with this frustration of just, like, figure it out.
Yeah.
Why can't you figure it out? You know, the entire time I'm watching, I'm sitting there thinking, like, stop drinking the goddamn milk. Like,
right?
Can we not?
It's like, after the most drawn out fucking car accident scene in film history, I'm like, this could be 30 seconds long, and they drag it out for literally, like, 7 solid fucking minutes. I'm like, how many turns is this car gonna fly around, and you think it's about to go off the edge? Oh, wait, nope. They got back onto the road, and it's like, oh, it's about to go off another edge, and then it's like, oh, wait, no, buddy's gonna get decapitated, and then it's like, no, wait, it doesn't end there. But anyway, you know, immediately after that, you're like, okay, so their brakes have failed, and then as soon as it cuts to modern day Billy and, you know, Aunt Cheryl's fucking crawling up on his fucking naked body before he's awake, you're like, okay, bitch did it. Like, this is just the way it is.
Heavy incestuous vibes.
Oh my god. And, like, I'm sorry, like, this is something you do not see in modern movies, and I think it's missing. I think this is something that needs to be explored in contemporary horror cinema. Like,
Mike wants us back.
Listen, like,
it gives it a creepy factor
that, like, I have never seen in a modern movie. And, like, were they good vibes? No. This fucking incestuous, murderous ant mother was not a good vibe. But was it an interesting vibe? Yes. Yes, it was.
And I was saying before, I said to Xylia as we watched it, when he's putting on the brakes and they're not working, I just kept thinking, did he ever think about just taking his foot off the gas? It's like this trope in movies where, like, the brakes don't work, and I'm just like, well, you know, the way a car works, if you take your foot off the gas, it stops feeding, you know, gas and, you know, stuff into the engine, and then the car slows down. I also really enjoyed that they obviously didn't have the budget to decapitate the guy, so it just, like, his head just kind of
went backwards,
falls back.
I call it a decapitation scene, but it really isn't. I'm like, yes, this giant fucking log is just gonna, like, kind of break his neck, right? Like,
and I don't know, you know, we can say now there definitely won't be a budget game. I could not find a budget on this film. I'm sure it was not high.
Girl, that's because there wasn't a budget. There was no budget for this movie. Everybody got paid in craft service sandwiches. Like, that's it.
I'm sure it's like people were like, oh, you know, William Asher made all these, like, famous TV things. Like, sure, we'll do it for you. But yeah, it was just, it's, like, very interesting. I also have pretty much the same favorite scenes, all the machete stuff, cutting off the other detective's hand. I thought that was really funny. 2 things we didn't bring up that I really enjoyed were, one, this is the prime example of why the jokes of white people playing basketball.
Oh, Jesus.
Because, as I said at the beginning, Sean, I'm a little bit of a basketball guy, and I was just like, man, this guy is terrible.
Well, listen,
like,
he
kind of
was
get
like
recruited to
7 feet
university.
tall and managed to get that little Nerf basketball in the little net on the other side of his room, which was, let's face it, about 2 feet bigger than a fucking walk-in closet. So, I mean, obviously he was a superstar. And he couldn't get his little fucking aunt off of him either. So, I mean, you know.
And
but they did have his little 5-pound hand weights on his bed behind him every time he was in bed.
Yeah,
so they were showing you that he was like, you know, fit and, you know, in shape and strong.
And I mean, if I'm asleep, I'm gonna probably wake up, you know, if my aunt or whatever you want to call her, you know, is like rubbing up on me,
like
and
tonguing the small of your back.
Yeah, so I feel like maybe he liked it a
crack.
Little. Also, another thing I thought was really funny was the terrible use of like freeze framing. Like, instead of slow-mo, it would just kind of like be still. And like I said, I was watching a torrent of it, so every time that happened, I thought my computer was just freezing. But it was just, no, it was just
is
like...
the file glitchy? No, that's actually the movie.
Yeah, it's actually, they just decided
that was
to make
their
this
aesthetic.
weird, like... And to me, it's a very fitting aesthetic, because I would expect to see that on, like, a television show in that era.
Or something. Yeah, exactly.
So, definitely fit it, I believe. I want to get right into, you know, what I said before when we talked about Steve Easton, is the entire time I watched this, I was like, the comparison, the Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is so crazy from... you know, this undercurrent kind of, to me, it was like a coming of age still,
yeah.
Even though they veered it so it wasn't, it was, let's be realistic here.
But it was, because they did say, like, you know, went out of their way to say, like, oh, essentially, like, you don't fuck your girlfriend very much.
And I think it was like, you know, the couch and the school, and like, so we had that vibe already with Nightmare on Elm Street 2, so that's all I could think of. As well as, you know, this film, we have that, I don't know what inverted final girl, where he is the final girl.
It's like a feminized male.
Yeah, and she is, you know, the protective boyfriend, essentially.
Yeah, and when you look at it, I found it very interesting in this film that, like, she spends, I mean, now there is a nude scene, obviously, of her, but for most of the movie, she is really, how do I put this? She is very clothed, sometimes in what I called, in my notes, milkmaid aesthetic. You know, and has, like, hats on and everything, and, like, frankly, I loved her looks. I really did. I think that they actually did a really good job with her wardrobe, but, like, she was not, like, one of these, you know, sex pots or anything like that. Like, she was, like, fully clothed, and he spent a lot of the movie, like, you know, naked, essentially. Like, sometimes fully naked, like, with his ass hanging out, and sometimes, you know, just in, like, his little 80s gym shorts, or, like, you know, in bed, like, just with a, you know, little, bed sheet wrapped around him, twisted, and I just thought that was so interesting. Like I said, it was kind of, like, feminized. It was kind of like, you know, classical art, like the, you know, the person, like, nude, maybe wrapped in a, like, leaning back and, like, you know, relaxing or whatever. And
I like that comparison.
Right? I thought it was very, like, pre-Raphaelite, like, you know, just reminded me of, like, a Botticelli. It was this, like, sort of, like, young body, like, you know, just sort of, like, in repose, I guess you could say, and, you know, inviting the camera to, like, admire it. And then the girl was not being objectified for once. Even when she was nude, it was not sort of, like, foregrounded, like, you could kind of see it and then it was gone again.
And I was gonna say, I feel like maybe I should have, like, started the episode with this, but definitely when you're watching this, you need to kind of really dig deep into it, because I know when I saw it, I was like, oh my god, this is like a trigger warning waiting to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
There is definitely, you know, if for some reason you're listening to this and thinking about watching it, like, definitely be prepared. Like, you know, the F word is thrown around crazy in this.
A lot, yes.
But you really have to look, you know, watch it. I encourage you to watch it if that turns you off, because the interesting thing this movie did, and we have to remember this is from 81, so they would have filmed this in 80, so we are talking about a very different time period, is the coach, who is the main gay character in this, is a hero. Like, he is...
Absolutely.
He's put in a very good light. It's not
he's not
used
vilified
negatively. And, you know, we're set up so that, you know, Detective Carlson is just as much of a villain as
the aunt,
as Cheryl is. Yeah.
Which is why, and it's so funny because, and another thing that this does, which takes slasher tropes and kind of turns them on their head, is that they have the, you know, killing the villain at the end, but they've killed two villains at the end because he gets killed too after she dies, which I thought was so interesting. And also, because you brought it up, I thought that obviously their treatment of like the kind of queer, it's not even a subtext, like it's a text.
Yeah,
like,
it's there.
It's there. It's very much. It's not like Nightmare on Elm Street 2 where it is a subtext and it's kind of a very tongue-in-cheek overt subtext, but like it's not foregrounded barely at all. But in this one, like you said, they throw the F word around a lot, and the guy that does it is a villain, and he's codified as a villain. There's whips on his wall. You know, he holds guns to people's heads and stuff. Like, it's completely bonkers.
We get that contrast too of like we're introduced to the other detective who is like the good detective, so we definitely get that villain-esque out of him that way.
Yes, yeah. It's not even like something that's left on the viewer to deduce. Like, they specifically, and again, you never get this in this type of movie. There's always one detective or two detectives who are working together to figure something out. Whereas in this, there's two cops in this who are foils to each other. So they give you this other guy to very plainly show you this guy is a fucking asshole. Like, he is a villain. He has issues. He clearly has some repressed nonsense going on. But I just thought it was so funny.
We know
that,
what
like,
he really wants.
This was 1981 this came out, and it's like, not only do they have this, like, the coach character who is, you know, probably one of the best characters in the movie. You know, he's a hero.
Easy.
He's a really nice guy. He's, you know, essentially the only person that the kid can count on and turn to. But, like, Billy himself is drawn, like, he's so, like, accepting and loyal and progressive in a way, you know what I mean? That, like, for the main character of a movie like this, and I just thought that was a really cool, like, it was just not even an issue.
Yeah.
And they kind of made him, like, what would we say? Like, maybe like a blank screen, and all these other characters would, like, project their shit onto it. Like, Detective Carlson clearly had issues with, like, homophobia, and God only knows what that stems from, but there was major things going on with him that he projected onto this child. There was shit that the aunt/mother projected on this child. The coach projected thing on it. Like, everybody, like, he was just sort of like this blank slate that everybody wrote their own story onto, and he just accepted it for the most part, you know what I mean? He was such a, like, accepting, progressive, like, loyal person, except for obviously the, you know, people like the cop, the bad cop. But I just thought it was fascinating, like, the way that they set all that up, and I'm just like, man, that this movie came out in, like, 1981 is kind of sick. Like, there are obviously some problematic elements to it, but, like, Jesus Christ, like, there's shit in this that was decades ahead of its time.
I was very surprised because, you know, as I stated before, I didn't know anything about this movie. I was just like, oh, it's a Mike pick. And not that I would expect anything less of you.
Thank you.
But, you know, I'm thinking like this low budget, it's going to be a low budget, cheesy slasher. And yeah, it like really had this powerful subtexting and not so subtext messages in it that are very, very progressive. And if you got confused just a little while ago where, you know, we said aunt/mom,
of course, the usual spoiler alert. It turns out his aunt is his mother.
Which I thought was a good twist, because I didn't see that coming.
Because there's the incestuous elements literally right from the beginning. Again, they don't hide it. Like, he's clearly naked in bed, and she, like, crawls up on him and is, like, you know, all over him like a fucking snake on a tree branch.
And I thought that was great to take it to that next level, because it's one thing to have the incestuous scene, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, so it's his aunt, there's gonna be like some weird story, and she's obviously into him or whatever. But then you just take it to that next level when it's not just incestuous, it's like his actual mother that is incestuous with him.
Somehow it takes that taboo and makes it even more taboo. It's like, how is this possible? That's the like buttons that this movie pushes. And again, even if you watch it and fucking hate it, like, this movie pushes buttons. This beats you over the head with all these issues, and there's just so much to talk about, and that's why I loved it so much, and that's why I wanted us to talk about it.
I'm very glad that we did. You know, let's talk about, is it scary? Was this a scary film for you?
No, it wasn't a scary film. Only in that, like, you know, it sort of electrifies that, like, kind of like high school coming of age, growing up, and then like kind of infuses it with that, like, you know, like homophobia and the bullying and all the violence, but the, like, you know, who can you trust? And it's just, but that's not like, you know, that's more of like existentially scary. So, I mean, in terms of, did it make my skin crawl? Did it give me a nightmare? No. But again, I don't think that's what it was going for. I feel like it was going for more of a bonkers, over-the-top, existential, like, Freudian fuckfest. In a Freudian way, it was terrifying. So that's my last word on that. It was Freudianly terrifying.
Yeah, that's a great description of it. Xylia would be proud of that description.
I listen, I have to conjure her spirit while she's under the weather, okay?
That's right. Represent the cover blur, what do you even call them? The quotes on the covers.
Yes, the blurbs, yeah.
The blurbs. Yeah. Are we comfortable to go into rating this?
Absolutely.
All right. I'll let you do the honors since this was your pick. Is it a nay, okay, yay, or slay?
Okay, I'm gonna qualify before I say this. Really, my ratings are always a sliding scale. I'm going to admit that. When I rate something, it's not an absolute. There's no zero. There's no resting point from which they deviate into the yay, into the slay, into the nay. I'm going to say I give this movie a slay because it's so memorable and so bonkers, and, like, I love showing it to people. I want to talk about it with people. Like, you could literally write essays. Like, I wish I had seen it when I had done my film studies course, because I would have written a term paper on it. It's so
definitely
much
paper worthy,
right? Like, it's like you can write a paper on almost any movie, but, like, sometimes you're really you're digging in shallow dirt. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing there. It's just dust. But there is some deep ass fucking psychosexual dirt. Like, you need not a shovel, you need a, like, backhoe to dig this shit out. And I've never seen anything like it since. And in that regard, I give it a slay. Like, I know technically it's a bad movie. It's got no plot, like, half the acting is not very good, the writing is over the top, but I find it fun. And there's lots to talk about, and, you know, we could go on for hours, and I won't, but I give it a slay just for that very reason. Like, I want to watch it again right now. I want to show it to my friends right now.
That is very, very respectable. I am going to give it a yay, and I think, to me, it's the same reasons. It didn't quite bump to what I thought I would give a slay, so I didn't give it a slay, but
that's fair.
I will say I went into it fully expecting this to be like an okay at highest or a nay.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
So this definitely is like a yay with flying colors. Like we said, there's so much subtext to it. There's so much more to it than just this low budget slasher psychological thriller. You know, we touched on the twists and the turns of it. They kept me guessing. I didn't see what was gonna happen at the end. The mother reveal, like, I didn't expect that. So I will definitely give it a strong yay. I think normally I always do this is a great film when you're with a bunch of friends to throw on, and I'm not gonna say that for this. To me, this is get friends, like, we have with each other on the podcast. You want someone with an intellectual mind to watch this with, that's ready to talk for a couple hours afterwards and just
because you can
really
engage with it,
dig in.
Yeah,
and it's so refreshing as we visit older movies that like have stuff that's so engaging. Because I think it kind of gets, these time periods kind of get discredited, especially the 80s, where we're just, expecting a typical slasher,
Yeah, just like some low-budget studio just pumping them out.
Yeah,
one
exactly.
After the other,
Yeah, strong.
And to be fair, this was... How did I think about it? I thought of it like... This is going to sound ridiculous, but this is sort of how I think about it to myself. It's kind of like an art film or like something existential, like some Bergman film, but like in the dressing of a made-for-TV movie of the late 70s, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that does make 100% sense.
Like there's so much like psychosexual baggage that like you would expect it to be like something from like Europe in like the early 70s, but it's but the aesthetic of it is like ABC TV movie 1976.
Yeah, you're so good at describing this film.
I have a thing for it. What can I say?
The main thing that's left is to announce what the next film is going to be, and it is my pick. Now, I flip-flopped through what I was going to pick. Even as we recorded this, I was like, out of the corner of my eye looking. I fully went in preparing to not disappoint, because as Xylia had claimed, she always picks the art house. Mike always picks these like trashy sleepers, and then I always pick the iconic. So I fully came in, and I guess you guys are just gonna have to wait. I fully came in preparing to do Friday the 13th, the first one, but I think, especially as we discuss this, I think they're almost just too similar to do back to back, even though I think the comparisons would be great. So I really want to do something different. So I am going to use my pick and do Repo, the genetic opera.
Wow, excellent choice.
We have not done a musical and a musical horror.
I have been dying to rewatch this for a very long time, because frankly I've seen it once and I was stoned out of my gourd and I barely remember it, but I've been thinking about it recently because I've been listening to Paris Hilton's album. And I'm actually so excited that you made this choice. It's such a Row choice too.
I've been saying probably for a year since we started that I wanted to pick it. You won't get to hear all my stories about it till the episode, but I definitely have stories about kind of the craziness. Me and Xylia saw this in the theater. I bought it immediately. I've seen this movie so many times.
Of course you did.
Yeah, so that is my pick. Before we go, I have to do our shameless plugging. Just make sure you're following us on all our social media at It Slays, Spotify. We added some new songs on the Spotify playlist, so it's the It Slays Horrific playlist, I believe it's called. If you look up the It Slays Horrific, it'll come up, and that's all just music from horror movies that we enjoy. One of the things me and Xylia have been doing is that if we review something that has a really good soundtrack, or at least a song we like, we're trying to upload a song from every movie we review now.
Oh, yeah, and we love to talk about the fucking soundtracks of movies.
That is very true. And kind of the last two plugs I have are... make sure to rate us, give us a comment rating on iTunes, just because that helps bump us up for people to find us. And we enjoy hearing what you think about the show, and we'll read it on the show, as well as the Patreon. Make sure to go follow us or join and become a horror hound at patreon.com/itslayspodcast. There will be, you'll notice when you go there, there's going to be bonus episodes that only Patreons get access to. And by the time you hear this episode, we should have the next Patreon pick, which is Colton's The Witch, out. And we've done Evil Dead, which was Ashton's pick. And so, yeah, when you join, you get to pick a movie for us to review, and you get to boss us around.
We love to be bossed around.
We do. So I'm not going to take that any further. So that is everything. Next episode, all three of us will be back, and who knows, maybe I keep trying to wrangle up a guest or two, maybe. So we'll see what happens.
We got things up our sleeves.
We got things up our sleeves, trust us. So as always, I am Rowan.
And this is Mike. See you next time.
See ya.